Hi everyone. Today with me I have Dr. Leigha Saunders, naturopathic doctor who is really passionate about sleep. Welcome, Leigha. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Anne.
Let's start with you telling us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I'm really passionate about helping women transform from feeling tired and turned off to energized and excited. And so, like you see, I'm sure in your practice a whole lot, is that women come to you at the end of their rope, often feeling quite burnt out and tired and in a hormonal uh, wreck. Let's just call it what it
Yeah,
is. And I want to really help women understand that there's so much that they can do to build themselves back up and recover from burnout and achieve hormonal balance again, and actually feel excited to get up in the morning and energized to get through their day and achieve what they want and live their best life.
that sounds amazing. I'm sure a lot of women listening to this and watching this will be like, yes, we want that.
That is me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are recording this during this physically distanced COVID-19 time. So tell me how are you taking care of yourself, of your sleep? What are you noticing in people that you're talking to?
Yeah, it's been such an interesting time because it happened so fast. And so our team here at the clinic, we were in on Friday the 13th, funnily enough. And then we kind of had an expectation that things were going to shift, and but we didn't think it was going to happen so immediately. And then we made the call on Monday the 16th to close. And so from a clinic perspective, we've taken as much as we can online. And I think that's one of the biggest benefits that's come from this experience. It's why you and I are connecting right now, and it's how so many people are connecting online through social media or through Zoom or through other online platforms. And it's really brought our team together in some surprising ways. And I think we'll be stronger in the end of this. And I just really find how community building, even though we're not physically connected, has taken off during this time. And I think it's something that we need more than ever right now. So it's been a really powerful experience. It's also been like a bit of a blessing for some people. And I know a lot of my patients are having mixed emotions because their life has actually slowed down a little bit. And without the commute and without having to rush out the door by a certain time in the morning and without having to drive kids around in the evening to all the different activities, they're actually enjoying some of the downtime. And I can kind of echo that too, because even though I'm still seeing patients on calls, I'm still like enjoying that lower pace and being able to get to sleep a little bit earlier and not feel like I'm doing a million and one things every single day.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm noticing the same thing. There was this weird pressure at the beginning in the transition that was kind of weird and off-putting. But this week, I'm definitely noticing that it's nice to have the time I cleaned my closet. So that was a big success for me. And
Yeah,
do the things that you
exactly.
normally just put aside because there's no time in the day or no energy after you do your day-to-day activities. So you touched on sleep, that you're going to sleep earlier now. Can we just talk about the importance of sleep and
Hmm.
how it impacts our health and our lives?
Yeah, it's really the foundation of health, and where it's where I like to start, or at least make sure it's in place for all my patients who come in, because when we are living such jam-packed lives, we often will cut sleep as a first thing to go out the window. And so we feel like we're being more productive if we can get more done in a day by actually going to bed later and then getting up earlier in the morning. But we really need to be getting at least 7, ideally 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night, of consolidated, uninterrupted, good quality sleep, to get the full benefit of sleep that it offers to us. And that's really like in the situation that's happening right now, we know that if you're sleeping less than 7 hours, especially if that night time spent asleep is about 5 hours, your immune system is going to really struggle to stay on top of keeping you well. And most people have experienced that at some point in their lives, when they have really pushed it and burnt it at both ends for a little while, right? And then you slow down and then you get sick, because that cortisol level is finally dropped off, and then your immune system doesn't have anything to run on. Um, and so I think it's just so important for people to recognize that, because we do it in kids, right? And that's what I always say. It's like, it's so obvious when a 3-year-old doesn't have their nap. and their behavior and the way that they're acting. And so now we're facing such a huge mental health crisis. And more than ever before, we're sleeping less than we ever have. And so I think that there's a correlation there that we need to recognize. And it's interesting because a lot of my patients have been saying they've been getting more sleep. I think it's either like one or the other. You're either not sleeping because you're anxious and worried about everything, or maybe actually able to lean into it and get a bit more sleep and noticing the benefits of that.
And I can definitely, I'm sure everyone can, but I can definitely attest to how I feel when I don't sleep. I feel more cranky. I have less control over my food intake, and just food choices, even. Like, I'll eat whatever's in my way, whatever I see. I'll crave more sugar. Exercise usually goes out the window because you're also more tired. And then
Mhm.
you respond differently to stress. And I know you touched a little bit on cortisol. Can we talk a little bit about the hormones involved in sleep, like cortisol during the day, melatonin at night,
Yeah,
and what that looks like?
it's like my favorite topic. Yeah. So if we take it from the morning, let's say, if you're short sleeping, so if you're getting less than 7 hours of sleep, you're going to wake up in a more physiological state of stress. And so what that means is that your cortisol and your adrenaline and those stress hormones are going to be higher than they would if you had more sleep. And so typically cortisol should start to rise in the morning to kind of give us that get up and go. But if you're waking up already feeling anxious or feeling like you're riding that emotional roller coaster, it's probably because those hormones aren't being kept in check. And then if cortisol is really high for too long, it can leave you feeling in that fight or flight or go, go, go mode. And when it doesn't come down, we have trouble unwinding. So cortisol should go up first thing in the morning to give us that energy to get our day started. It should then slowly come down in over the course of the day to a low point, but not its absolute lowest around 3 p.m. So a lot of people who experience that afternoon crash, right, are having that bottoming out of cortisol at that time. Or then they're just like tanking on blood sugar because maybe they haven't fed themselves properly during the day, and then your cortisol is trying to make up for that. And so by then the evening, when your body is probably tired and asking you to go to bed earlier, if you push that bedtime beyond, say, 14 to 16 hours of when you've gotten up in the morning, which, if you think about it, if you're getting up at 6 a.m., that's a bedtime between 8 and 10 p.m. And a lot of people are getting up at 5:30 and going to bed at 11 or later, right? And so then that cortisol is going to pick up again in the evening when that's at the time it should be its lowest, because when cortisol is low, you can feel rested, you can feel relaxed, you can have that sensation of feeling like you've decompressed from your day, and the melatonin can pick up. And melatonin is that key hormone that helps initiate the onset of sleep, which is then where we can talk about how, like, yes, you and have probably been in front of screens all day, and it's great that technology has brought us all together during this time, but we also need to be really mindful of that screen time, because it's primarily that blue light that's being emitted in our faces and into our eyes that's telling our body artificially it's still daytime. And then it takes a little while after we turn off our technology for that melatonin level to rise. And then if we're stressed at that time, or if we're watching the news or like scrolling social media in the evening, it's doing that double whammy of giving us that blue light exposure, but then also maybe generating some of our stress hormones at that time.
hmm So I definitely want to talk about this a little bit longer, for especially the screen time. How about the people who, I'm sure you have these patients that I can only fall asleep in front of the TV, or I can only fall asleep, after I've like I've been scrolling on my phone and I just can't keep my eyes open. What about those people?
Yeah.
What,
Yeah.
what's happening
So
in
I
their
call it the pre-bed
physiology?
nap.
Okay.
The pre-bed nap when you fall asleep on the couch. So typically we go through our days just like we were talking about, with a jam-packed schedule, and we're always on reception mode. So we're getting tons of emails and text messages, and we're always responding to the needs of other people, whether it's our coworkers or our kids or society in general. And then at the end of the day, finally, when those things have settled and we get a chance to sit down, you're probably like, the hard work to do is to actually check in with yourself and say, like, hey, how am I feeling? And what are maybe some unresolved stressors that I need to kind of digest and decompress from the day? What am I feeling anxious about? What do I have to do tomorrow? What do I not have organized? Like it's actually hard to sit down because we want to avoid that, right? And so turning on the TV or scrolling through social media is just a distraction. And it can be such a beautiful distraction that you end up kind of relaxing because you're not tuned into all those things that you don't want to be thinking about. And so you just are finally able to recognize how tired you are and then fall asleep. But what happens to me all the time, and this was last night, we were watching a movie, and my eyes were getting really heavy, and I was so comfortable and cozy, but I knew even if I fall asleep for like 10 minutes on the couch, I have to like by the time I go upstairs and get ready for bed, I'm awake again. And then it takes me a whole lot longer to fall back asleep.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think most of us have experienced that at some point or another, where we fall asleep and then we wake up and then we're like, great, we're up. Now what? Um,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. So, how about your other hormones in your body? Do they have an impact on sleep? Like, let's talk about sex hormones. Do they have an impact on sleep? Are there changes that happen over the span of a menstrual cycle?
Yes, this is such a good topic. And so I'm in a different office today because I needed a change of scenery, but I usually have this hormone graph that shows the fluctuations of estrogen and progesterone over the course of the cycle. So for a cycling woman, one thing to watch out for and monitor is if you notice sleep changes over the course of your cycle, primarily in that premenstrual phase, so the 1 to 2 weeks before your period, that's when estrogen is lower than other parts of your cycle, so the week up until ovulation, and when progesterone should be nice and high. But for some women during that window, estrogen is maybe not high enough, progesterone is not high enough. It's maybe a little bit more related to estrogen there, but a lot of women will notice sleep disturbances like more anxiety during that time, trouble falling asleep or staying asleep because of that, and even an increased body temperature and some night sweats, or just like increased sensations of warmth at night during those 1 to 2 weeks. And so it's in that window, like you don't have to be perimenopausal, you don't have to be menopausal, but even that shift in week to week during your regular menstrual cycle and the drop off in hormones there can definitely decrease your ability to fall asleep
Hmm.
and stay asleep.
Yeah, and you touched a little bit on night sweats. Can we talk a little bit more about that, from for all, like all ages of people? Because night sweats and feeling hot at night is a very common occurrence in today's society, whether someone is menstruating or not menstruating anymore, um, and that
Yeah.
impacts sleep significantly. Right? There's a lot of disruption in sleep that happens because of that. Can you tell us why that happens?
Yeah, so estrogen has a serotonergic effect, which means it helps generate serotonin in our body. And then ultimately, serotonin gets converted to melatonin. And so there's a connection there with our ability to make that hormone that initiates and maintains sleep, but also just to keep our body temperature regulated too. So it's quite obvious to like the menopausal woman who's having those daytime or night sweats, daytime hot flashes or night sweats. But even those fluctuations in estrogen over the course of our cycle, and it will be the lowest during menstruation for women who are currently menstruating. And so if you pay attention to how your sleep and how your feeling is over the course of the month, and you can certainly track this in your period tracker app, that's what I commonly recommend to patients, you'll start to notice. So the common thing that patients will tell me is like, sometimes I don't know why I have trouble sleeping and I go through these phases, and I was having trouble sleeping a few weeks ago, but now it's fine. And then we don't treat it, and they come back and they're like, it happened again. And I'm like, it's your cycle. We just need to track it. And then they're like, you're totally right. So I think we just need to pay attention to where those sleep disturbances are happening over the course of a menstruating woman's cycle. And then if a woman is between the ages of honestly like 35 to 55, that's a pretty broad range, but anywhere in between there could be considered perimenopausal. And just the monthly fluctuations in those hormone levels can be enough to start causing more of those symptoms and be disrupting sleep. And we need our body temperature to drop over the course of the night to maintain a deep sleep, which is why it's recommended you keep your room at like 18 degrees Celsius, regardless of where you're at in your life. And that's why women who are then having night sweats have so much trouble sleeping, because they wake up and their body temperature has all of a sudden come up. And that's, yeah, it's a wake up.
For sure, and I find
Fine.
that these women are also typically, partnered with someone who likes the house at, like, 22 degrees all the time, so it exacerbates their symptoms. So that's interesting. Okay, and then we talked a little bit about melatonin, or we talked a lot about melatonin. Are there any, obviously, we're not giving medical advice here, but are there adverse effects to taking melatonin long term? How come some people sleep really well on melatonin, others don't? Can you shed some light
Yeah.
on that?
Yeah. So the amount of melatonin we produce is actually really, really small. And the amount in supplements is like I- hundreds of folds higher typically than what we actually produce ourselves. And I think we need to look at like the quality of the supplement that you're taking, because I know that there has been studies and investigations to see like what's the actual active component. And unless you're taking a really high quality supplement that's, third party tested, you might be kind of rolling the dice in terms of the actual dose that you're getting. So I would start with a recommendation of like making sure you're working with a practitioner that can advise you on good professional grade brands, or seek out brands that have, clarification on their third party testing and quality control. And then really understanding what dose you're taking, because the biggest mistake I find people will do with melatonin is think more is better
Yeah.
and be overdosing themselves, and they'll be slamming themselves with like 10 milligrams of melatonin a night, when 1 to 3 milligrams is typically enough to address a sleep issue. And in the research, we know that melatonin is most effective for jet lag. And even within 5 to 7 days of use, it will help correct your body clock. But there's not really any long-term data on it being an issue for safety purposes if you're using it for longer than that. And I think that there's even the opposite. There seems to be some benefits because melatonin is also an antioxidant and it can confer some estrogen receptor modulatory activity. So it can be quite beneficial in women who are maybe a little bit more predisposed or at risk for breast cancer, or who shift workers and things like that.
Hmm. Thank you for that. And next, I want to ask you the big question. What are your top tips for sleep? What are your recommendations? What can people do to improve their
Yeah.
sleep?
Yeah, it really often starts at like, where are you having trouble? And so, if you need a really simple place to start, the most effective thing to do is pick a consistent wake up time. And I think that this is relevant right now for people too, because our routines have largely been disrupted. And so, it's easy to stay up a little bit later, and it's easier to maybe sleep in, or just get up when you feel like it, or spend a little bit of time in the morning in bed just kind of lazing around. But if you pick a consistent wake up time and actually get out of bed, it sets your day up for success and your body clock to get on track. Because if you sleep in an hour or two, then you're essentially like jet lagging your body an hour or two that day. You're going to be more likely to go to bed an hour or two later that night. And then when it comes time that you actually have to get up at an earlier time, you're going to have a harder time actually getting enough sleep that you need, because now you're going to bed at midnight when you still need to get up at 6 instead of going to bed at 10 and getting up at 6. So that would be my number one tip to start with, that's like super accessible and easy for everybody. And then it's building it out from there. So if you're getting up at 6 a.m., ideally you're giving yourself an 8 hour sleep window. And so give yourself a 1 to 2 hour window in the evening before that ideal bedtime to build in a routine. So I always say like bedtime routines are not just for kids, adults need them too. And make sure, like we talked about, the first time you're checking in with yourself isn't when your head hits the pillow. So make sure that there's some screen free time in between the last thing that you're doing at the end of the day and the time that you get into bed. And that could be journaling, that could be taking a shower, that could be doing yoga or meditation or deep breathing or whatever it is. It could just be sitting on your couch and having a cup of tea. Like, as long as there's something in there, I find that when you incorporate some form of meaningful routine for you that helps you de-stress and decompress, that's in a low lighting environment, your body just gets a signal that it's time to unwind and start to sleep.
Mhm. And how about this question just came to me? How about blue light blocking glasses? Do those work?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's one study, and I think it's really small. There's like 12 or 14 people in it or something, and they all reported sleeping better. So it's not like the highest quality study possible, but at least it's there. And theoretically it makes sense, right? Blue light we're exposed to more now because of the LED light bulb. So it's a great invention, and of course it's energy efficient and all of that, but the primary type of light that we're exposed to right now is LED and blue light. So you can swap out your light bulbs. Like in our bedrooms, we have melatonin supporting light bulbs, so they're pretty yellow, and they're those like old school incandescent. They're not LEDs. And I always make a conscious effort to lower my screen brightness towards the end of the day. And I do, of course, have a pair of blue light blocking glasses.
Yeah, so do I, and that's why I was like, that was also like a question for me, a personal question.
Yeah.
So you touched on it a little bit, but what does your sleep routine look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I try to be technology free in the evenings as much as possible. So I'm typically just throw my phone on airplane mode at like 8:30. And most evenings you can find me on my couch having some form of herbal tea with my husband. And so there's a really great local herbal tea company out of Uxbridge. They grow all the herbs in this area. And so they have a couple of different sleep related blends. And so I'm typically just like decompressing and we chat or we'll read our books. Sometimes, like last night I mentioned, we watched a movie. So I guess it's a little bit of technology. But then at the end of the day, I also sometimes like to have a hot shower or a bath. And then I generally just like go with the flow. If it's been a really busy day and I need to unwind, I might listen to a guided meditation or do something like that.
Yeah, that sounds nice.
Yeah.
I love herbal tea. It's such a great way to unwind for a lot of people.
Yeah, and we go through our days sometimes with like just on go go go, and it's honestly like the chance that we actually get down to say hi, like how was your day, and actually talk and actually connect. And sometimes if we're not and we're like each reading, like the silence can be glorious too.
For sure. And that's the other thing that I'm hearing from people right now in this time is that we're actually talking to our partners about, not just getting things done, but about real things,
Yeah,
having real conversations. So I love that
yeah,
you incorporate that regularly. And I think
yeah,
we all need to do a little bit more of that. Okay, so Leigha, where can people find you? How can they connect with you? How can they learn more from
yeah.
you?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm most active on Instagram. My profile is Dr. Leigha Saunders ND. And so it's pretty much spelled just like my name, if you can see it on the recording. So my first name is spelled Leigha. And I've got some links in my profile through there for my top 7 tips for a good night's sleep and a mini training on the test that you need to figure out why you're so tired, how you can identify your sleep obstacles and overcome them, and then how you can ultimately achieve more by doing less.
Perfect, and I'll link those
Yeah,
in the description for this video so
that'd
everyone
be
can have
amazing.
access to that and hopefully
Yeah.
connect with you.
Yeah, I would love to. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here.
Such a good idea.